Welcome to the Diabolical Vulgarian Troglodytism. I'm the Vulgarian Troglodyte, and today I'm gonna talk about my journey and my thoughts on classical music. And I'm a big fan of classical music, although my knowledge on it is very poor. And I think I've liked classical music in a form or another for most of my life. And by the way, this video will be fairly stream of consciousness, and I'm gonna talk about many different things relating to classical music. And in the end, very briefly, I'll mention some of my favorite recordings and composers, and a few recordings that I have listened to recently, because I've been in the mood for classical music in the past few days, and I've listened to some recordings that I wasn't familiar with before. So I took some music lessons as a kid. I played the guitar for a few years, but I never got very good at it because I didn't put enough effort into it, like outside the lessons. But back then I of course had also some music theory lessons, like very basic stuff during those lessons. And then in Finland we also have lots of music education, like mandatory music education in schools, and I even played in the elementary school band and performed a couple of times. But that wasn't classical music. But I just wanted to kind of say that as a bit of a context, because I think the fact that I took some music lessons and the fact that I have some experience playing an instrument really helped me to get into classical music later on, and helped me to understand and appreciate many different musical genres, and helped me to enjoy many different musical genres. Yeah. But I never had any lessons on classical music. But I think even as a kid, when I heard it here and there, I already liked it. And then when I got older, in my late teens and early 20s, I sometimes listened to classical music, but I didn't pay attention to the recordings and things like that. I just maybe put Shostakovich on a music streaming service, and then I just put on a random recording that maybe had collections of certain composers, well, maybe string quartets or piano pieces or symphonies or whatever it could have been, and then just listen to them randomly, and I didn't really pay attention to which piece it was that I was listening to. I just paid attention to the composer and then just listened to it and enjoyed it. And for a long time I found it kind of hard to get into classical music again, not because of the music itself, but because of the fact that there were so many recordings for all the famous pieces and all the famous composers, and the fact that all the pieces are usually called Symphony number 5, and they don't have a song title like other types of music have. So that type of thing put me off for a while, and that kind of thing was something that made me kind of bit scared to get into classical music a bit more, because it felt like a totally different world to other types of music, even though I was still listening to classical music from time to time. But that put me off of getting into it even more and really paying attention to what is this piece and what is that piece, and what is the period that this composer belonged to and things like that, because I felt like there was such a huge that there were so many things that one has to learn to properly get into classical music. But then in the past few years I stopped caring about that type of stuff, and I've just enjoyed classical music more. And now I've been in the past few years like tried to also look for particular recordings. That was something that I didn't do before, like I said. So now I might, like for example, Google that. What are some of the best recordings for Schubert's Death and the Maiden? By the way, that's one of my favorite pieces, and I already know a good recording for it, but I'm just using it as an example. And yeah, now I kind of pay attention to the recordings more, as I think most classical music fans do, at least the kind of fans that are really into classical music, maybe the very kind of casual classical music listener doesn't pay attention to the recordings. Yeah. And of course one can go to classical music performances as well and watch like performances on YouTube as well, but I haven't done that much of that. I've never actually been to a classical music concert, although I've always wanted to go, and I'm sure that I will go in the future and hopefully even regularly. And obviously I'm lucky that I live in Finland, and in Finland we have lots of talented classical music players and conductors. Like it's actually pretty interesting how such a small country has produced so many conductors that are well known internationally and who work for like the very big like orchestras all around the world. And we have like very good classical music education in Finland, and of course we've had some great composers like Jean Sibelius and Eino Juhani Rautavaara and Kaija Saariaho and people like that. Although I've mostly listened to Sibelius out of those three and bit of Rautavaara, but not as much Saariaho yet, but I want to listen to her stuff in the future as well. Yeah. So it's good for me that I live in a country where there are lots of symphony orchestras and good classical music education, and there are lots of opportunities to go to classical music concerts as well if one wants to. Yeah. So my kind of problems with classical music have been like very kind of basic things again, like I said. So it has never been about the music. I've always been able to appreciate the music because I was lucky that I was exposed to lots of kind of more technical and complicated music when I was very young. Like again, as I was playing electric guitar, I listened to some of the kind of shredder type of guitarists, so they often played kind of neoclassical stuff. So from that I've gained appreciation for like people who can really play their instruments and people who can do anything with their instruments. And now as I've gotten older, I really love listening to music where you can hear how much effort the players have put into their instruments and who can really compose these very complicated and interesting pieces. Of course there's always this debate, maybe not as much in classical music but in music in general, that less is more and that simple music has more emotion, but I've always thought very differently, and I think complicated music can have as much emotion as simple music. But of course complicated music, you often maybe have to listen to it more times to get to the emotion, and maybe it doesn't speak to you immediately because it's harder to digest. But you can get better at that just if you are willing to engage with more complicated music regularly. And I feel like I, for example, been able to just understand and enjoy that type of music more and more and more the more I've exposed myself to it. And now I can often appreciate that type of music even on a first listen, and I don't always need to listen to something many times to appreciate it. Although at the same time, the more I listen to it, I of course learn and hear more of the details that the music has to offer. Yeah. So one of the things I love about classical music is that it's the kind of ultimate expression of that kind of complexity and technicality that music can offer. But at the same time, I think classical music has lots of emotion and it gives you that sense of wonder. It has that awe-inspiring nature to it. So it definitely isn't technical and complicated just for the sake of it. But that's one of the very kind of rich and interesting things about classical music and something that keeps drawing me in to it. Yeah. And I think the classical musicians, of course, many of them just practice 24/7 and they are among the absolute best musicians in the world. And yeah, I mean, we don't have to rank musicians. I think it's stupid to kind of say, oh, this player is better than that player. Yeah, we can just say, oh, that player is my favorite, but I think most of the best like instrumentalists are in classical music, and then of course there are lots in jazz, and then in certain forms of metal music, for example, there are lots of amazing musicians there. But I think in the end, probably in classical music, you have the most great players. Yeah. And I'm like someone who likes lots of different types of classical music. So I don't necessarily have like a favorite period for classical music. I like everything from Bach to Mozart to Beethoven to Chopin to like Bela Bartok and Arnold Schoenberg and people like that. I've sometimes heard that in the classical music circles there are like two types of kind of elitist, you could say. Although when I say elitist here, I don't mean the term in the way that we usually think of it in the classical music discussions, where like classical music people think that they are superior to people who don't listen to classical music. So I'm not talking about that here. But I'm not talking about elitism in the way that there are certain people who might only be into the kind of basic stuff, so maybe Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, like Schubert, and then they might look down on, I don't know, Arnold Schoenberg or Penderecki or some of the kind of more the composers who, for example, use lots of dissonance in their work. That there are the people who kind of reject that kind of goes outside the box, and then they just want the basic stuff. But then on the other hand, there are the people who only listen to the kind of quote-unquote more difficult composers, and the composers who are ones that the average classical listener doesn't listen to. And then at the same time they might say that, oh, Mozart and Beethoven, those are too basic, you should broaden your horizons and only listen to this weird dissonant stuff here and just ignore all the basic names. And I've actually would like to kind of hear people's thoughts about that why people are like that and where does that come from, and what are your opinions on kind of those types of distinctions. Like, I haven't seen that much discussion on that, but I've just sometimes here and there in social media, for example, seen people talking in those terms, where I've seen like somebody leave their like 10 favorite symphonies, and it's all the kind of basic names, and then there are comments that, oh, why are you so basic? Why don't you listen to these kind of more obscure composers? And then there are the people who kind of put down the weirder stuff. Yeah, so I would like to hear people's opinions on that stuff. Again, I don't belong to either of those groups, because I like to listen to Beethoven and Schubert, but I also love lots of the dissonant stuff. And I love dissonant music in general. I sometimes say, and I've talked about this with my friend Altes, for example, that I feel like one of the things why I love dissonant music is that it sounds like my brain, basically, that it sounds like what is happening like between my ears and what is happening in my mind. So that's why I love dissonant music. And dissonant music, even though it sounds off-putting and it maybe doesn't make sense to many people, but to me, kind of intuitively, it makes perfect sense because the kind of emotions that come from it, the anxiety that comes from it, are a big part of me and who I am. So that's why I love like dissonant stuff a lot, whether it's dissonant classical music or whether it's dissonant music in general. Yeah. But now I really love classical music, and like I said, now I'm trying to put more effort into kind of paying more attention to the recordings and trying to explore different composers and stuff like that. Yeah. But like I said, I'm still very much of a novice, and as I listen to pretty much all types of music, I don't have the time to kind of always just focus on classical music because I want to listen to pop music and metal music and jazz music and hip hop, etc. as well. But bit by bit I want to learn more and more about classical music and discover more great recordings and more great pieces and more great composers, both old and newer ones. And hopefully at some point I can start going to see some performances of classical music as well, of all types. Yeah. But those were some of my thoughts about classical music, and now I'm actually gonna cut and show you some of my favorite recordings and some that I've listened to recently. But I'm not gonna go into those like in detail. I just want to kind of show that stuff like very quickly. And then based on those recordings, you can also leave me some recommendations for your favorite pieces and your favorite composers and recordings, etc. Yeah. So now I'm gonna quickly show some recordings that I love and then some recent listens. But as I said earlier, I'm not gonna get into any kind of detail with these recordings, but I'm just gonna show you some and also mention some of my favorite composers as I do this. So this first recording is by the Alban Berg Quartet. So this recording has two pieces from Schubert. We have Rosamunde and Death and the Maiden. And I absolutely love this recording, and I absolutely love these two pieces, and Schubert is definitely one of my absolute favorite composers. Yeah. And then from the Alban Berg Quartet as well, we have this that has a piece from Debussy and a piece from Maurice Ravel. And here you can see it has two string quartets, so one from each. And yeah, I love both of the quartets a lot. Yeah. Don't know which one would be my favorite. Love both. Yeah. And I love Debussy and Ravel, like in general as well, but still need to listen to more from both at the same time. Then we have this recording of the Planets by Gustav Holst, and this recording is by Herbert von Karajan and the Berlin Philharmonica. Yeah. So I would highly recommend this one. Of course, there are other famous recordings of the Planets as well, but I really love this particular recording. Then this is of course something that probably most people know. So it's The Rite of Spring, a famous Stravinsky piece, and this is played by the New York Philharmonic and the great Leonard Bernstein. Yeah. And this is of course a piece that has been recorded so many times, and there are so many highly acclaimed recordings of this piece, but this is one of the recordings that I really love. Yeah. Then this is one of my absolute favorites. So we have the 6 string quartets composed by the great Bela Bartok, and this is performed by the great Takash Quartet. Yeah, absolutely love these pieces and the performance here. These are quite dissonant, but that's probably one of the reasons why I love them, because like I told you guys earlier, I love dissonant music. but these can be quite challenging and maybe too off-putting to some people, but at the same time they aren't the kind of most dissonant stuff that you can find out there, but not the kind of entry-level stuff either, I would say. Yeah. Then Chopin might be my number one favorite, and I've been into Chopin for a long time. He was kind of one of the first composers that spoke to me. His pieces are often like very kind of quiet, serene, and beautiful. I think very accessible as well, but of course there are certain pieces and certain parts of the pieces that are very technical and impressive in terms of the kind of playing in those pieces. But lots of the parts are just very chill and accessible at the same time. But Chopin's pieces always hit me emotionally and I love them. And this is one of the best recordings of Chopin's pieces, I think, by Christian Zimmermann. Yeah. Then we have Maurizio Pollini, and he's also a great Chopin player. So, for example, this recording is amazing. Then there's also another Pollini recording that I love. Where is it? Yeah, it's here. So we have Bela Bartok's like two piano concertos. Yeah, love that. Yeah. And I need to also listen to more stuff from Pollini because, of course, so many recordings. Yeah. Then we have the great Marta Argerich and more Chopin. Yeah, this is also a top tier Chopin recording. Really love it. And with Argerich also fairly recently listened to another recording. Yeah, it's this. We have a piece from Prokofiev and then Ravel. With this recording, I especially love the Prokofiev piece, and that's something that's one of like Arkerich's, I think, favorite pieces to play, and one of her kind of you could say comfort pieces. I think she has said, and I also after I've listened to this recording, went to YouTube and watched the live performance of her playing that Prokofiev piece. Now that she's, I think, in her 80s, and it was so impressive that at that age she can still play it perfectly. Like how can your fingers move that fast at that age? It's crazy. But the Ravel piece is very good as well. But I think the Prokofiev piece overshadows the Ravel piece a bit here. Yeah. Then these I listened to recently. Okay, we are back to Takach Quartet, and we have the late string quartets by Beethoven. Yeah, these were absolutely incredible. Yeah, it is a fairly long recording, uh, but you can, of course, you don't have to listen to all of them in one sitting because there are several different string quartets here. Yeah, but loved it front to back. Would highly recommend this one. And then we get into the one that I've been listening to in the past few days. So I've listened to three recordings by the Arditi Quartet. I think lots of their recordings are very highly acclaimed. And the ones I listened to, so I think I started with, where is it? Yeah, this one. Again, Arnold Schoenberg. Again, four different string quartets. And these were incredible. I think the string quartets get better like as they go. So the final one was probably my favorite one. Then the third one, my second favorite. And yeah, least favorite was the first one. Although I loved all of them. And at least in my untrained ear, I felt like they got more dissonant, like through each quartet. So that was interesting as well. But I would highly recommend these pieces. And now I actually realized that I forgot to also show one other Schoenberg recording here. Maybe I'll go back here and then yeah, it's with Hilary Hahn, again a virtuoso violinist, and it's actually the recording that's here. So this recording I've loved for a couple of years. So this has a piece from Sibelius and a piece from Schoenberg, and I absolutely love both of the pieces. And yeah, her performance and also the performance by the Swedish Radio Symphony Orchestra. And we have one of the famous Finnish conductors, Esa-Pekka Salonen. Yeah, but we highly recommend this recording. And I've listened to some other stuff from Hilary Hahn as well. So, for example, this is great. Like again, Paganini and Spohr pieces. This one I haven't listened to in a while. But yeah, two again violin concertos. So I would highly recommend this one as well. But yeah, back to the Arditi Quartet. So I showed the Schoenberg recording, but I also listened to a couple of others. So after the Schoenberg, I listened to this one, Anton Webern, the complete string trios and quartets. This was absolutely incredible. Love this stuff. Again, you can see the stuff here. I mean, it's in German, so might be hard to kind of see or know what all of these pieces are. But yeah, I really love this front to back. This was quite dissonant as well. Yeah, great stuff. I think that was my first exposure to Webern. Of course, I've heard about him, but I think I've never really listened to him before that. So this was a great introduction to his work. And then finally, I listened to this, and it's the composer is Alban Berg. Again, string quartet and like again, I mean, this is in German, so I don't know what this would be called in English. I mean, I know the Streich quartet means string quartet, so it's string quartet 3. Yeah, but I love this also. Front to back, incredible work here, and I think all these three recordings from Arditi Quartet, even though I've just got into them for the first time, I can already say that they are probably gonna become like new favorites for me. But anyway, so those were some recordings that I love and I have listened to also recently. Let me know what you think of any of these recordings, and I'm also gonna keep on listening to more stuff from Arditi Quartet. So this one, for example, I'm excited to get into. Yanis Xenakis is the composer here, and this has chamber music 1955 to 1990. And yeah, I've read about Xenakis a little bit in the past couple of days, and sounds very, very interesting. And again, here we have the very dissonant and avant-garde again. So I think I'm gonna love this probably, hopefully, an atonal there as well. So yeah, good stuff. Yeah, looking forward to listening to this one soon, hopefully. But yeah, let me know all your thoughts on classical music, and you can let me know any recommendations and stuff. Thanks for watching. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.